To the software cooperative meetup. We read the book Making Work Visible. We're about to review it, and we think that it's going to help us um, become a better self-organized team. So this is our review and how we're going to apply it to um, software cooperatives. I'm going to read some of this out here. So, as worker directors in a software cooperative, we juggle many responsibilities. A given day can include feature planning, building new software for a client, onboarding the associates, handling accounts payable, preparing marketing materials, and more. Each day goes by very quickly and can include a lot of context switching. So we're going to go ahead and look into this book. This is an interesting thing because I also, you can apply this to software development. You can also apply this to running a business because there's plenty of tasks that slip through the cracks. So that's kind of what was one of my questions for the group as far as, how do you think about applying something like this to marketing tasks and all of these other things. So high level overview of the book. It's mainly about time thievery, and there are 5 ways for your time to be stolen. Too much work in progress, or WIP, unknown dependencies, unplanned work, conflicting priorities, and neglected work. And the way that this book tries to have us combat that is to expose it publicly. So there's demand analysis. There's making sure you put your work items in the proper categories because they have different workflows. You have the way that you design your work items or your cards, and the way that you map your workflows. Does anybody have any comments at all about the book, generally speaking? Did they enjoy it or what?
There were a lot of parts to the book. I can't say I enjoyed it because while I was listening to it, they were listing something, and then I was like, "Oh yeah, that happened when."
Yeah.
So I was getting too involved, I think, with each one, and I was remembering how stressful it was, and I was listening to it like on my weekends, and then I was getting all upset about work on the weekend, so I had to like step back and say, all right, it's over, it happened, let's learn from it. Now it has a name. So before it was just like, that really was hard. It felt hard. I'm stressed out about it. But now it's like, it was hard and it has a name and it was neglected work or whatever the case may be.
Okay.
So a lot of it rang true and a lot of it, I had a lot of examples in mind for each kind of category and each kind of, even improvements. Like, yeah, we can do that here and here and here. So the only thing, like with a retrospective, is start with one thing and try to make one thing better. Otherwise, it could be overwhelming. But there are a lot of good suggestions and ideas for this book. I'm glad that we read it.
I really like the naming. I think that helps everywhere. Naming a thing so that you can own it, change it, conquer it, whatever you want to say. I think that's a big deal. Being able to communicate about it. It's one thing to walk through with someone, and then it's another to be able to define that process or whatever we do. Being able to talk about it. I think a lot of things that we've struggled with been around someone not understanding the process or not understanding how to communicate what works for them. So we do a lot of things like the personality stuff and learning styles, and I think that helps with individual being able to talk as a group. I think this is good, having some tools to be able to talk. And defining I think what you're saying as far as doing one thing, priority on stuff, because there's some item that talks about if you do these tools and here's some ways that you could do it. And for us, that may be like, okay, we can't do all those things because we work remote, so we're not going to be able to just immediately implement. But I thought it was awesome to see so much relevant communication. Looks like we have several folks that have joined us. Howdy. Adam. Hey, Denver.
Hey,
Hello.
how's it going?
We just did a little overview of this book at a very high level. It's really about streamlining your process and making work. The name of the book is Making Work Visible, and how you expose that. So there are certain little, I guess, bad practices that steal your time. There's 5 of them. We're gonna go over them now. The main one, the ringleader, is WIP, or work in progress. So in the blue here, I have some of the like the attributes of WIP. You got some things that we should do as far as trying to track WIP. They come through sometimes as a silver bullet. That's what you can name what a VIP would say, this is important, right? A business request. So that's coming somewhere from within the corporate structure, and then there's your team, and then those are normally like bugs and technical debt, security, and those things, right? So too much work in progress is the issue, right? And it being invisible is another issue that's layered on top of that, right? So we're trying to, I guess the general idea is to try to make this stuff visible, usually on Kanban boards, but there are other ways to make them visible. But usually some type of, it doesn't need to be an electronic application or anything like that. It can be on your regular board in your office, which is repeatedly said in the book. So what is WIP? It's when work arrives faster than can be completed, right? So it causes context switching. New tasks start before the old tasks get completed. And if you are monitoring it correctly, you will have it show up on an aging report. I haven't really used an aging report before, so there's probably all kinds of things showing up, or should be showing up for me or teams I've been on. Why does WIP exist? You've got tribe mentality. You don't want to let people down in your tribe. You've got public humiliation. That's great, right? And then you've got very important people favors, right? All of these are when people just pop up and drop some work on you, and you either will be embarrassed that you aren't able to accomplish them, or you want to do a favor. There's also optimism, good old programmer optimism, or anybody else. We think that we can do stuff faster than we can do it, and just a regular starting a new task is much more fun than finishing the task. So we all know the last 5 or 10% of the task is really another 80% of the work. Right? So some things to try to fix: the work in progress, maybe track the WIP per person, they have horizontal swim lanes. So that's having swim lanes where those are lanes inside of your Kanban board, and you try to track the WIP there. Another thing is to have a limit, and with WIP limit will force people to, when they get towards the end of the task, so that last 10%,
it will force them to innovate to finish that task instead of trying to go over to something that's more fun, what have you. So, any questions about WHIP?
I liked in this part where WHIP exists because you don't want to let people down, and so that means saying yes a lot. Yes, we can do that. Yes, we can add that. Yep, we'll do that too. And part of what I try to do, and it's so hard, it's against my nature, is to say no more. So, and make trade-offs.
Mm-hmm.
So if I say yes, then I will say, and that means this other thing that's at the bottom of your list won't get done. So are you okay with that trade-off rather than adding, 11 onto 10, 10 onto 12, always keeping it at a certain number and letting the customer know the trade-offs that they're going to see.
Yeah.
Make them make that decision. Oh, I have to prioritize. You can't just do it all. I thought it would be easy. I thought if I asked, you would just have the answer magically, and maybe it would be done automatically without interfering with the other things that are started. That's the hard part.
Oh, yeah.
Say no.
Any other experiences that you want to share? Because you've experienced it. So.
I think going along with saying no, it's hard to say no when someone is trying to help, but what they're doing, some of the work is not visible. Then it's hard to say no to some areas if you don't have enough information. So the point isn't that you don't want someone to help and you're not trying to get somewhere. It's that group effort that you're trying to get to. So that making it visible reduces fear on being able to say no or knowing when to, I won't say no even. It's helping as a group to prioritize. You can't do that.
All right. Anybody else?
I think like I don't know, that's a really interesting one. It's like several reasons I've even fallen victim to it. And a lot of it has to do with like even just there's like blockers that can arise where like this thing gets tricky and it's not all black and white. It's like, oh, I had a blocker, and instead of just drawing stick figures on the paper, you kind of want to do something else until you're unblocked. But then even aside from that, there's like just staying disciplined to not get bored with what you're working on and resisting the urge to work on something else, and that's like definitely a problem, but in real life it can get gray.
Right.
Yeah, it seems like there's a fine line between having, if you're waiting on something, and do you go work on something else? So does that mean now you have two things working in progress? Or did you move the other thing out while you're waiting? If you're waiting on someone else, I guess it's a handoff, but where do you say there's too much work in progress that I have, or the whole group?
What about
Identifying that.
one thing I'm seeing is there's a priority list, and a big part of what she's talking about in this book is you have cross training. She brings that up a bunch. So it's if you're not cross trained, then you can't even help even a little bit on the other priorities, even though you're blocked. There's other priorities on the list, and so you'll want to do something you can do instead of help with the higher priority that is probably you can't do. So cross training starts to become a factor, and we'll talk about it later. But it's that last 10% of the priorities. Anyone
Let me do
else?
3 things right now because I can do them. They're low priority.
Unknown dependencies.
Can you click view and full screen?
Me.
Yeah. Cool. That just makes the image a little larger for everyone.
This little connecting. All right. So we've got unknown dependencies. The biggest thing about this is communication across teams is a very hard thing to do. She says the hardest thing to do. People moving between teams, like cross-functional stand-ups, they have a high coordination cost. So there's a section of the book where she's talking about they tried that and it was very expensive. And this is, and keep in mind, multiple teams within an organization working on projects that had to coordinate. So what they did was have a dependency matrix, or they did a bunch of things, but dependency matrix, it made the high coordination costs visible. And keep in mind also that they were putting this right as, I guess, right as you walk in the door for executives and everyone to see. And one, I guess, when blockers came up on a project that required another team, the big issue is getting the expert guidance on that blocker. So coordinating that is an issue. When you have the dependency matrix, you can kind of tell that some things might appear when you are trying to implement your builds and solve your problems and stuff like that. So it shows how expensive that is. And it says, okay, you're going to need this communication and here's why and all this stuff like that. She started talking a lot about product teams versus project teams. The project team, one of the attributes of the project team is they do more handoffs. So they might implement a feature and then they hand off to operations, and who hands off to QA, who hands off for it. Whereas a product team is they're going to have less handoffs. There's still going to be one human that can do more on operations, let's say, than the features or QA, but they are all there for the life of the feature, they don't move off. And so that was the big thing there. Right, so we have that, and let's see what else. One of the ways to solve it also is a comp on board with 2 lanes. So you have one with dependencies and one with no dependencies. You probably will see the ones with with no dependencies, those tasks will rush through really fast, and the ones with dependencies, you'll notice that they don't. So, you guys have anything to say? Unknown dependencies, making them visible.
You love them, don't you?
We see it. We see it a lot. They come up a lot.
Yeah. For me, what's that?
You have the doc open.
Yeah.
Things share Opco or make it available to everyone.
Absolutely.
Top right hand side.
Oh, I've already. It's can comment. You trying to?
Anyone with a link can
Comment.
edit. It should be everything.
Oh, okay. You're making it editable.
Yeah. Something changed while we were had it open.
Okay.
Anyways, I don't want to refresh, but we'll see. Anything else? Unknown dependencies?
For me, my background has been in freelancing, consulting. Before the cooperative, Vault Cooperative, I was doing a freelance collective. And it seems like in consulting, for me at least, freelancing, we were running into unknown dependencies all the time. You're coming in, and some clients may be, longer, 6 months or a year and a half or so, or you come back, but you're often coming in to help in an area where the team didn't, the internal team wasn't able to handle something, or too much work, or maybe it's just an area where their expertise, or you're working with a customer that's non-technical. So there'll be all sorts of issues. When I've worked in product, at a company where there's products and you have more time, it comes up, but maybe not as often. And then for me, that's what I was saying. And legacy software, which we happen to do quite a bit of, there's a lot of software that's sitting there that people haven't touched for years. And the last people that did anything with it have been gone from the company for years. So you'll be working along and everything's fine, and then like whatever feature you've defined is like just balloons. So that comes up. And then of course, if we work with a lot of different people in our the way that we're set up. So you have to have the communication on when we're collaborating on development, the communication on the different parts. And so how much information do you give? Are we going to be very detailed on the implementation? There's a level where you don't need that. And then there's some parts that may be, this is not as simple as we said. Maybe it needed to be broken down. And those dependencies, like how far did we define? This one seems very relevant to us.
This one's super relevant, both with internal and external parties not giving all the information, because it's like, well, assume there's something that everybody just knows it.
Right.
And so that's definitely the expert guidance on specific problems where we would have to ask that specific question and ask, what is this about? And then they would say, oh, well, it's this.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that.
Okay.
Oh, now we know. So that's good. We see that a lot, both internal and external, with legacy too.
Yeah.
Things that we're jumping on that we didn't develop ourselves and trying to understand better.
What do you think about making it, all of these time fees, the solution is to make things visible. So what do you think about making it visible to some of the projects that we're dealing with where they have dependencies? Like the suggestions that they have on come on board, put it very simply in their face.
Yeah. So that when we're doing, I guess, more of the consulting side, when we have a little bit more of a mix now, but some of the consulting, there may be a development team that's doing a large portion of work and we're helping in some other area, and we have an integration point. And we have worked with customers where we have no visibility into their development process. And we try to define where we integrate and any handoffs and try to make it where it's really well known. That's not always followed or understood, or there may be variables that come into play. We find out there's something on the customer side that would change everything, and we should think of a different solution. So having that visible, I think, would be a big deal. And probably the other way as well. And we've done that. So, some misunderstandings on what our process is have led people to assume something happened that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So
She had 2 lanes. She also had on the card a dependency little sticker. I hope you guys didn't see it, but a little dependency sticker that you put on the thing. I mean, I could show it to you later. But yeah, that was another one. So yeah, it's pain.
It's so hard to mimic the beauty of a whiteboard and colored post-its and stickers and avatar stickers. It's so hard to mimic that online. I just don't think a tool exists that is as efficient as being all, having your team all in one room and everyone looking at the same whiteboard. And swim lanes on a whiteboard make a ton of sense, but swim lanes on what we're using just doesn't make
It's
sense.
not colored. It doesn't stand out. Yeah, you just can't tweak it the way you want.
Yeah.
So
we use labels, and then I get label happy, and then it just becomes too many labels. So
and it's almost double work because it's effective in the moment, but then what about when everyone forgets? You'll need to transcribe it digitally. So
that's true. I've had to do that. Yeah, where I've had the executives in one room where we would all prioritize on the whiteboard, and that was just like, so good. And then I would have to transcribe that into a ticket for the offshore team. So they weren't even just outside of the room, they were outside of the country. So there was double work there. And the team, and I would also take pictures of the board. Be like, just pretend you were in the room sitting on the couch with us. This is what the board looks like. Okay. That was a lot of work to do that.
All right, the next one, unplanned work. Invisible items are hard to repair. It seems pretty straightforward, right? So the way to combat that is to try to record those interruptions. One record to keep was your work in process. Work in process allocation, the percentage of it, the ratio, and the allocation of time. So the ratio between planned work and unplanned work, and then having that visible. And the whole part, even the name of the book, making work visible, it's like it's making it visible to the team. But for me, it's interesting to me to make it visible to the customer, because all of these things, when you're having this negotiation, it's like, why does this cost so much? Well, here, it's kind of all 5 of these things. If it's in their face, it's a negotiation technique. So interruptions, you've had us change, you called us 5 times a day or whatever and had us change. It's all right there for you to see, right? Interruptions on each work item and all that stuff. But probably you need to have internal and external, but that would be something. So she has some examples of ways to try to combat that. The goalie is someone that run interference, and they also do cross training. She's big on talking about cross training. But basically, somebody who let's say VIPs or customers or whoever can contact, and they don't contact everyone on the team. Office hours is where you publicly say, this is where we can schedule time with you, meet with you, and you can interrupt us. Right? You can call us at this time. So that seems like something that would be pretty useful. Do not disturb hours. We're not going to answer the phone between this time and this time. I don't know about within DevOps saying something like that, but maybe you can try it. And then Pomodoros, that's kind of our own, probably more internal teams. We do Pomodoros, so 25 minutes, and then look at the phone after that's done, that kind of thing.
So, any comments on the unplanned work stuff?
We have a lot of unplanned work coming in a lot of different ways from a lot of different people.
Yeah.
Working on open source projects, we're now helping other folks use our open source code. So we've opened up the channels there. We have issues coming in from GitHub. We've got 2 Slack channels where 2 different Slack groups, actually. I'm not even going to count channels. 2 different Slack groups, orgs, with things that can come in. We've got emails. It's all over. And those are the main source of unplanned work, I think, is the customers, which, that we have to prioritize and respond quickly, coming in through Slack and coming in through emails, and then the public GitHub issues that we need to respond to right away. So that is something that we've considered. The office hours is something that can really help with. Every day I go in and make sure I don't have any emails that haven't been responded to quickly. And Slack is like its other beast where it's like instant almost. Emails, you have like a little bit of a grace period. So we are talking about trying to set some kind of office hours where we can work with the open source community.
Yeah.
Because that's important. The cross-group collaboration is really important. And also making sure that we didn't book our day with a bunch of planned work and now have to shuffle everything else around for all this communication that we can just expect. It's going to be there. And it's good. It's a positive thing.
Yeah, that's part of what she's talking about. You record it, and over the course of a couple weeks, then 35% of your time is unplanned work. 25% of your time is unplanned work. Then you can plan, because you know how much unplanned work you have.
I like the idea of adding capacity for that. So your office hours may be modified to do that. Some of it could be emergency stuff that could tie in, I think, with the DevOps, where we know that things are, or I'll say more operations side. We need to be able to handle any production issues. And we end up a lot of times talking directly with executives with our projects, and sometimes we're going to get something delivered from them while we're working on a high priority item, and if they push it down, then all of a sudden that becomes a high priority. Make it visible, of course, that it's going to change. It may mean that we had to context switch or whatever, and that's going to affect expectations on the rest. So
yeah,
I like the idea of capacity and the office hours. I'm kind of personally on the side of, I want to be do not disturb by default, and then I'll set office hours, and anything else is, so here's when I'll respond. Any other time is up to me.
So that's, remember, the main thing is supposed to be making it visible. So supposed to record it and make it out there, regardless of how you try to do other ways to combat it. But the unplanned things seems.
Internally, so for Volk, one thing that I've been trying to help a lot with, so usually Lucina's driving this, it's we've been taking on a lot of new things and expanding what we're doing. So I've been trying to help a lot with unplanned work, and that's come up often while we're working through a large project and we're seeing areas that we're missing, or maybe things that if we could change, then it's going to help us to be more responsive or speed up development or whatever it is. And knowing this is a really good thing, but we shouldn't talk about it now. So trying to capture it, put it in a ticket, and then we'll come back to it. So that way we can prioritize it and not be as reactive, but make it visible that this is there. And sometimes that's actual items that, okay, here's a dependency or some other piece that we need to do that we didn't plan for. And ideally, if it's not a full blocker, we say we're going to be in trouble by the time we get through this part of the feature. We can split it out. So we'll go, hey, we missed this, we need to add this. Can we actually complete this item or not? If we can't, either way, add that in. And that's internal. So I think the next big thing is something that you've been talking about, Watson, is how do we make that more visible to folks outside of the team? And I think we're working towards that with thinking office hours, doing a lot more public tickets, and how do you communicate that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do record interruptions now. So it's like when the ticket was a go, and then it was a no, and then it was a go, and then it was a no. I date all of those different changes in the ticket now.
And
So
we've talked about writing some software.
Yes.
That would visualize that. Yeah. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Would you mind moving the screen a little bit? I didn't intend to just go right on you.
Didn't even realize. Yeah, it was right on you.
Right. Next one, prioritization.
The best.
Unplanned requests create a lack of prioritization. So this one goes hand in hand with the unplanned work. And there are many ways to combat this. The visibility, you want the priorities to catch the eye of the stakeholders. You want to force conversations between stakeholders and implementers. You want let's say, let me go straight over to the methods because I found that to be the most interesting part of this. There are different ways to prioritize. The famous one is the HIPPO method, which is the highest paid person's opinion. You've got a bunch of tasks. You might have a expert prioritize them based off of how long it's going to take and what they think, and then the executives come in and say, actually, all of us will be out of a job if we don't get this one done. That kind of thing. That's one. You've got cost of delay. So how expensive is it when you fail? And the dependencies. Right. So revenue, value, and all of the dependencies, revenue and value of all that are dependent on the feature that you're talking about. Then you've got first in, first out. So trying to be efficient instead of waiting around or context switching. You've got something that comes in, you start working on it, and then it goes out. But when you don't do that, you can have something come in and sit. Right. So there's that, and then the weighted shortest job first. So it's kind of a low-hanging important fruit, but not really low-hanging fruit because it's weighted. It's important, valuable, but it can be done quickly. So that's another one. So these are all methods. There are other ones, but it's interesting or important to note how you're doing your priorities. And when they change and then the methods change, that's an issue, right? So a high level important thing to keep in mind, organizations usually will do resource efficiency. So if people are sitting around, managers get unhappy because people are sitting around, instead of doing systems thinking, which is an efficiency of the whole system. So remember, if you go back to the work in progress, if you have too much work in progress, stuff piles up, people get interrupted, all the other things. But so that means if you don't do that, you might have people sitting around. So those things are kind of, it's a paradox there. And based on like the book, The Goal, and then DevOps, the Phoenix Project, same kind of concept. So, but after you prioritize something and you work on it, you're supposed to be committed to it. You're not supposed to go back after that. So, any questions?
This one seemed easier when it was not consulting work, when it was with a company that was just focused on one goal together. So, and everybody bought into it. Everybody agreed. These are our goals. We want to increase revenue. The easiest one. So what are the tasks that are going to help us increase revenue? And we're going to prioritize the features in that way. So that seems a little more clear cut, not without negotiation, not without some conflict, obviously, between departments. But being in consulting, we have, it's definitely client's opinion of what is highest priority. And then on our internal things, it's sort of like what's the most interesting sometimes. Mm-hmm. I'm always a fan of what can we get out first. So what can we break down into small pieces and get out the door to show visible progress? That's sort of my favorite prioritization method is how can we show visible progress? How can we show working software to the customer? But it's tricky.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's all.
I like the way to shortest job first.
I like that one too. Mm-hmm. It's just the politics for each one of these. Think of the politics, right? So highest paid person. That's always it. Yeah. Always, every time they might defer, and even when they do defer, it's like, yeah, but you really should be doing what I suggested. Uh-huh. Right? Yeah. So you've got that, and then you've got the cost of delay, right? So that reduced revenue, whatever, that's a good negotiation tactic. Like, it's going to be this expensive if you don't do this. And you can always go, that's a good principled negotiation base, right? Mm-hmm. That one, you put it all together, right? And all the dependencies and all that. That one's a good one. That first in, first out, it's that one I see is make for managers, they hate people sitting around. Yeah. And I can see the frustration with people like, what? It just seems like how we have work to be done. 3 people are sitting around. I'm going to get fired as a manager if they come in here and see 3 people sitting around. This is, in a regular corporate place, right? So they probably like that. But the way to short job first, when negotiation wise, again, you're working on this stuff that's low hanging fruit, but important. And then they come in and, why aren't you working on the little birdie that flies across the screen like I asked? Right. So that. Because
to me, it seems like weighted shortest job first should take that in consideration. So I'm going to weight based on the revenue value, and I'm going to weight based on the highest paid
you
person.
Think that and HIPPO are the same thing, the way you're talking about it.
And what?
And the HIPPO, the highest paid person.
Yeah.
And it's not. They want this little birdie that flies across the screen, it costs $1 million. Mm-hmm. And then that is, the big, hairy goal. And then there's 5 things under it that can be done much faster. Yeah. And all of that. Those are the ones that are in this. But they're going to turn around. They'd be like, yeah, we need those. They're valuable. When they turn around, no matter how many of them get done, they're like, yeah, but it doesn't matter unless you get the number one.
Yeah.
no matter what. That's their negotiation. Right?
Well, hopefully there's like multiple of those. So I think at some point you're going to always have that problem.
Yeah.
So really what we've been trying to do internally is to, hopefully it's not the birdie for a million, but if we said there's, maybe there's like 10 of those that are smaller, but they're still frustrating, they're large. So what we've been trying to do is say, can we get these 4 done and then work on this again, and then this 4 done and then work on this again, so that the overall delay to get that little birdie flying across the screen increases by some amount, but you actually get it done. It's just that it delayed and you had a lot of short things. Versus if we just say we're only going to do the shortest job first, weighted shortest job, you may never get to that thing ever.
Yeah.
And that would cause problems. So kind of a balance between this.
So making it visible on what the method is and putting it out there,
Yeah.
right, is part of the book. They had this embarrassing board where they had the priorities and they came in and then they rearranged it. The executives thought, oh, hell no. And they changed it. And then they came in again and put 4 brand new projects that no one saw before on the top. And like, these are the only things that matter. It doesn't matter if you have 30 other ones. Right. And so it was chaos.
Yeah.
People were, but they saw it. I almost think that might have been her way of having like a sadistic kind of fun with with the executives at whatever jobs he's at. But yeah, it made it to where they felt the pain and they had at least a negotiation base where they come back and how come you're not doing the 30 things? Oh, the board, you have the 4 things that just appeared today. So that, but the method is going to be whatever the method is.
Yeah. Sure.
Making it visible is the point.
Yeah.
For her, at least.
No, I agree. Making it visible, I think, for us is definitely the point. And that includes internally so that we make progress, and externally.
Yeah, it's easier to prioritize some of the internal tasks that are directly related to revenue or income. Like, okay, we have to get this item out because this is worth this amount of money.
Yeah.
Do we want to eat pizza? Or do you want to eat ice? Let's do the higher priority.
Anybody else? All right. The last one. Negligence. Important work, when it's neglected, turns into urgent work. Right? And it steals time and it lowers the value of things all around it. And it's just a big time sink. So new requests automatically work against aging requests. Right? An example of negligence from the book is they had a process where they would plan, then they'd implement, and they'd validate. And this validate step would be neglected. So they would have 100 tickets that were supposed to be validated, and they just sat out there, and it became a bottleneck. One of the things that she did was make a Kanban board and ask everyone to come in and say, where's the bottleneck? And they see 100 stickers in the validate portion, and they say, oh, I think it's that place right there. And so they all knew what they needed to do. So there's a bunch of things there that she did, but one of the main things that caught my eye was having a time limit on work, and it just dies after a certain amount of time, which seems controversial. But the story that she had, which is probably rings true, after, and it could be 30 days, it could be 100 days, but things that have been hanging around for 100 days are probably no one's going to miss it when it goes. And remember, it's expensive to have it around as part of the idea of negligence. So having a time limit on the work, say if you started at 30 days on these work items, and then you force people to look at that work and close out those tickets, and then you make it shorter and shorter. So people are forced again to innovate at the end of the task and find a way to close out, even though they have blockers, right? An aging report is one way to see what is or has been neglected. Right? So, and then you have an aging report, you can have on your stand up, hey, these things are aging, they're getting close to the whatever the limit was, 30 days. Then you get the person who created the ticket and the person who's implemented and say, now off the side, have a 10-minute meeting on how to close the ticket right after the original stand up. So that's handling that part that I really hit home for me for this is neglected work is not the revenue generating work, it's the revenue protecting work. Revenue protecting. So getting around the catastrophes, security stuff, the systems on fire, all the stuff that we do, all of our careers, and the stuff that they don't care about until they're on fire. So this is the stuff that is not prioritized, it's not implemented, it's not the top of mind for the executives, and they don't care about it until they feel the pain, right? This is the neglected work. And it just hit home for me because it's a big part of our value add. When we go somewhere, we're managing dysfunction, all this stuff. They have a bunch of neglected work. They have a bunch of old stuff. And it's like, yeah, no one wants to pay for it. And it has to be on fire. And then when they have enough pain, then they're ready. So
I really like the word revenue protection.
yes.
That resonated with me in this.
Yes. Yep.
And it seems, I don't know, I guess it's hard to sell. And Ben asked if you could sell it. I mean, people buy insurance all day. It's almost, you're talking about folks don't care until they're in pain. It's almost like what would be great is you lost $1 million if we wouldn't have gone ahead and protected you. You know? They want to see the drop. So they go, oh, okay, that's why this annoying extra stuff happened, not just for fun. And it wasn't usually fun. Revenue protection.
Yeah, if there's a way you can convince them up front. I'm always a fan of 10% of our effort each week goes to bug fixes. Bug fixes come up, they're going to interfere with adding new features, which everybody wants. So I'm always a fan of like having a percentage of, and we're going to do bug fixes, so allow time for that.
Right.
If you can also build in, we're going to do bug fixes and we're going to do necessary maintenance or revenue protecting upgrades so that we don't get to the point where it's all broken.
Yeah.
That would be great to start at the beginning of an engagement with these expectations in mind. Because they're so easy to throw away. They're not the fun new feature.
Revenue
It's not a problem.
That's a good phrase there.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's a good phrase.
Because people, for some reason, if you talk about risk mitigation, they just isolate that. Unless
I
you're
think
talking
the biggest example and the most neglected ever, and this even like creeps into prioritization, unless like we as an agency are just firm about it, are tests. And so that's like, because I mean, even with bugs, a lot of things aren't bugs; they're just regressions. Something did work, but now doesn't anymore because you didn't know it because the tests weren't there. And so yeah, I think that's my biggest. That's what I would give it to. no one ever wants to pay for tests. Just make it work the first time around and make sure it keeps working.
How do you make this visible?
The aging report. You make the tickets and you kill the tickets.
Yeah, that's okay. What about negligence, where we're actually needing to do the work? So how do you make it visible that you're not doing it and we're getting the risk is growing because you're not protecting the revenue? So how do we make that visible?
If you have the tickets on there and it's saying, okay, upgrade security on the agent report, and then it gets to day 30 and it's there, you have to kill it or do it. And it's there for the customer to see too. And so, hey, we either have to do this security thing or we're going to do your piece. This has been neglected. We've had you interrupt us, all the other ones. And so now it's here. We're going to do it or not. And, you know, they could very well say no, but it's there. It's not like we didn't have it on our list for 30 days or 100 days or whatever. They pile up. You know, you're going to put the tests on the agent report. That would be probably, they would just die. They would totally die. He said do them. But,
You gotta make that visible though. I'm worried about both sides, that we neglect things that are going to cause problems, or we have folks that are like, I'm not going to neglect it, I'm just going to do it anyways, but it's not made visible.
agent report. I don't see, she didn't have anything else. Could say, well,
I think a real life example would be to search out studies or search out exploitations to that X version that the customer might be on, and they're not upgrading. But when we see like, oh, it's been exploited this many times, and this is a true threat to your revenue, then they take it seriously. Maybe.
Yeah.
But that's
can
not
be
always
an
the
alarmist.
case. I mean, things can be old for a while.
Yeah.
Until it's a problem.
Yeah.
Oh, the hackers are smart now. They don't want to let you know. They just like, oh, I got a new botnet or whatever, or Bitcoin mining machine. No.
Oh.
We're good. We did it. Any questions?
The book is at the end. Also a reference to this meetup, which has some more info.
All right.
Recommend reading it. Audiobook is decent, I thought. We can get the ebook or the other, but it's good.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks, everybody. The next one will be the first Wednesday of April. So April Wednesday 4th.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
See ya.